Hey everyone, this is Zach with 8020 Automotive, here today with a video on fault code P0480, symptoms, causes, and diagnostics. P0480 is triggered when the PCM, or the powertrain control module, detects an issue with the electric cooling fan or its control circuit. When the engine's coolant temperature reaches a certain number, that should trigger the fan relay to actually turn on the electric cooling fan to provide that additional cooling to the engine. So any issues here could potentially cause the electric cooling fan to not turn on at all. Ultimately, when that voltage is incorrect and the signal isn't within its normal range, that will in turn cause the PCM to trigger fault code P0480. So a few of the most common symptoms associated with this fault code include the check engine light turning on, the engine overheating, and potentially poor performance. Now, poor performance would most commonly occur when the engine is actually overheating, and in turn reducing performance to prevent any additional engine damage. Now, one thing to mention here when it comes to overheating, when you do have an issue with the electric cooling fan, it is pretty uncommon for the engine to actually overheat unless you're idling or traveling at very, very slow speeds. And it's because in these situations, that's when you don't have enough air coming over the surface of the radiator on its own, and so that's where the cooling fan is essential for turning on and providing that additional fresh airflow over the radiator to help keep the coolant temperatures in check. So most commonly, overheating would be experienced with this issue if you're going at extremely slow speeds, say stuck in rush hour traffic, or letting the vehicle idle for extended periods. Generally, the cooling fan on most engines is not required once you're up to 20, 30 plus miles an hour, as you then have enough air moving over the surface of that radiator. So main point is, if the vehicle is constantly moving and you're not idling for extended periods, chances are you might not even notice any symptoms here, and you might really only get the check engine light and the associated P0480 fault code. Moving on to some of the most common causes of fault code P0480. The most common cause by far is going to be a faulty cooling fan relay. An electronic failure with the cooling fan itself could also trigger fault code P0480, along with any circuit issues. So this could be damaged wiring, loose connections, etc. And then another potential cause, one that's much less common than the others, is an issue with the PCM itself or a problem with the coolant temperature sensor. So with those common causes out of the way, now that you know you have fault code P0480 and understand some of the common causes and symptoms, how do you actually diagnose this fault code and determine what is actually causing this issue? The best first step always diagnosing any issue is using an OBD2 scanner, hooking that up to the OBD2 port and reading any stored fault codes in the PCM. These codes are critical for pointing you in the right direction to start diagnosing the issue, since a lot of the times, depending on what the fault code is and what the issue is, you can also receive other fault codes that can help point you in the right direction and diagnose the problem. For example, with P0480, if you're also receiving some fault codes that are indicating a potential issue with the coolant temperature sensor, that could point you in the direction of that sensor potentially being the issue. Or if you're getting all sorts of various fault codes, that could potentially point to an issue with the PCM itself. After that, if you know it's something related to the electric cooling fan or the relay, and you're just getting fault code P0480, then the next steps are to start with the very basics. So first off, pull and inspect the fuse that controls the electric cooling fan on the vehicle. Locate your fuse box and check that fuse, make sure it's not damaged and having any issues. After that, check the wiring and all of the connections leading to the electric cooling fan. Any damaged wiring, loose connections, disconnected sensors, etc. could all cause this issue, so just make sure there isn't any visible damage or loose connections. After that, try to confirm whether or not the cooling fan is actually kicking on. Again, if you've been driving the vehicle a great time, most vehicles, especially on a hotter day, if you're idling or stuck in rush hour traffic, you will actually hear the electric cooling fan running, and it can generally be pretty loud, especially when stopped or idling for an extended period. So you can check that, see if the cooling fan is actually turning on. Again, don't push things too far because the engine could potentially overheat, but check to see if the fan is turning on. If not, when the vehicle's turned off, try spinning the electric cooling fan by hand, see if the fan spins freely or if there's potentially something blocking it or something damaged maybe within the motor. that's not allowing the fan to spin freely. Once you've checked that and confirmed that there aren't any basic issues or anything that's out of hand, and you know that you're trying to diagnose just fault code P0480, then the next step is going to be testing the voltage to the cooling fan and all of the sensors. Ensure that they are receiving that signal, and if so, once you confirm everything is receiving the signal, you can then pinpoint down depending on where there might be signal issues or voltage issues, and tell whether it's an issue with the cooling fan itself or potentially the cooling fan relay, which again, a lot of the times that relay is going to be the most common problem that causes fault code P0480. Anyway, guys, that wraps up our video for today. If you appreciated the content, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more in the future. Thanks, everyone.